This was the most English thing I've ever seen.
It is
This was
entirely
from the Tyne to Penzance, from Canterbury to Crewe.
Yeah.
It describes the entire part of that island perfectly.
You're not going to believe this, but every time I see this movie, I keep forgetting that the last time I saw it, it was like, oh, it's a comedy. It's a comedy of manners.
It is. It's a comedy of manners. It was so English. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And of course, written by a Hungarian Jew and photographed by some sort of English.
Michael Powell once said of The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp that it is a 100% British film, but it's photographed by a Frenchman. It's written by a Hungarian. Its musical score is by a German Jew. The director who was English. The man who did the costumes was Czech.
Yeah.
That about sums it up.
And yet.
Yeah. Well, mind you, it's still.
How many American Technicolor films from the 40s do you ever see that break outside into London during wartime?
It's weird. It's wonderful seeing London during wartime in Technicolor. How they pull that off?
The soundstage and matte paintings.
I mean, Natalie Kalmus did not.
No, I mean there were some scenes that were definitely outside, John.
Yeah, there was the location stuff in London was real, but a lot of it was
I know there were some real locations, but
it was all done at some studio, right?
Yeah.
And
there's some stuff in the pub that you could see the backdrop was like 10 feet away from the back door.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking of Black Narcissus.
Chris is about to explode.
Okay. What's wrong, Chris?
I'm just gonna. All right. So, how I feel about this movie there's this. You guys. It's funny, we just watched Barry Lyndon a few weeks ago, which had a nice, this thing behind me, like the build up to the duel.
Yeah.
And then there's a fucking duel. This movie spends as much time with the build up of the duel, and the second they start fighting, the camera cuts away.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
To a hospital.
There is an interesting story here, but they chose, in my humble opinion, to tell it in the most boring fucking way possible.
Oh wow.
It's 3 hours long.
Boy, is it.
It was a 2-night watch for me.
It's very English.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Deborah Carr was great. I wasn't tremendously thrilled with the lead. I thought his German buddy was better, but it was a chore at times for me to get. Wow. It's very soap opera-y and very like Douglas Sirk, like melodrama.
Which is weird though, because every so often it's
all
not.
This shit sitting on top of a very, I think, very interesting and strong narrative about a guy. Like how many times do you in history do you have someone who could go through the Boer War all the way through all these conflicts, every one of which kind of tweaks what being a soldier means, what like being in the military means, like what it means to the the ripple effect to the people you interact with in the course of your life. Mm-hmm. Like that's very interesting. I just didn't think that, and maybe it's just again too much of the old-timey movie thing. I felt like the movie had every opportunity when it could have done something to draw me further into the story, it would do something exactly the opposite.
So
that is the British style, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I get Michael Powell as like, total effing godhead in terms of like, filmmaking. I wanted to love this way more than I did.
There are points in this movie where it 100% nails it, though. That's it may be more disappointing to me because of scenes like the scene where they're waiting around the radio for him to give his speech, and then he doesn't give the speech, and he comes back, and there's the little bit of like comedy of her like hiding the cigarette and then not wanting the sherry and all that other stuff. But like I actually just went back and rewatched that right when I got home.
Wow.
Because I wanted to remember what it was that I liked about it so much. And what I liked about it is there's different levels that are happening in that scene. And it does a really good job of showing you what you should be paying attention to at a particular point in time. So like he's in the background reading the letter that he got, and it's not until you come back to him that you realize he's sad about what's going on in the letter. And then you have her mention the home guard, and maybe you can be in the home guard, and he's like, yes, I can talk to some people, and blah blah blah. And then the servant comes in and he goes, I joined the home guard, and it's like, it does this really good sort of stage production dance through this single set of characters coming and going and doing things and switching focal positions and stuff like that. And it's compelling and interesting visually and from a storytelling perspective and from an acting perspective. And boy, why didn't they just do that the entire time?
Interesting question.
Well,
Like,
they're
you
both
had
dead.
it in you had it in you to do that. Like, why couldn't it have been 140 minutes, 130 minutes of that instead of 160 minutes of this?
Good question.
That's my, like, that's
I
like,
don't-
to me
I
it's
don't
more
disagree.
disappointing. It's more disappointing because of that. Like, you can see flashes of genius in this movie.
Well, maybe you're saying like the more modern film kind of busting out of a kind of a studio type film.
Sure.
Maybe that's what's going on there. And
I did feel that mesh of like more modern things happening in the filmmaking and things that felt sort of traditional and a little stagey or stuffy. I mean, there's a great thing at the beginning or near the beginning when we first meet, he's not named Colonel Blimp, he's Candy. Clive
Wing
Candy.
candy.
Oh,
And
he's
he's in-
sugar candy.
And he's in the steam room, and he's
Right.
just this ridiculous walrusy mustached fat bloated character, and his eyes are popping out, so he's an object of ridicule. And then to transition into the flashback, he falls into the bath, and then the waves come rippling across, and when he gets out of the bath, he's a young man.
Mhm.
And
I
they
like
did that
that
in
part.
camera with a double
Right.
because it was him in makeup as an old
Right.
man.
That
And they
was
did-
cool.
That was pretty damn cool. Yeah.
That was cool.
And there's some really clever shit going on in this movie.
The whole thing with when he's younger, and we'll have a pool in the basement, and like until the floodwaters come, and that whole scene on the steps I think is good. And then it cut, you go to later on and with what's behind John,
The ending.
salute, and
Yeah.
I
And
thought
it-
the last quarter of this movie redeemed a lot for me.
Yeah.
Like it in starting to wrap things up. It started to work. It was working much better for me as a story.
It got better as it went along, and this is something that I said about the last film, about and even more so for this film, in that I enjoyed it after it was over, thinking about the entire arc of the story, than I did during it, because I spent, what is it, almost 3 hours long, right? Spent
Yeah.
45
Oh,
minutes.
just over 3 hours long.
I think in the beginning it's over 3. Okay,
Yeah.
so I spent
it's no,
No,
it's
it's
160.
245.
Okay,
Yeah.
whatever. It's long.
But talk about, I said there's a complicated setup in rules of the game. This movie, I was completely paying attention to the wrong things for about the first half hour, I think.
Wow.
First I thought it was going to be the story of the young man who was going to buck the system and win by declaring war before midnight. I thought he was the main character.
Right.
And then we get into the steam bath, and that's 15 minutes in. And it's like, oh, it's this fat old guy. He's the main character. Oh my God. Okay. And then he goes off.
And now it's the Boer War.
Now he's
Yeah,
investigating.
exactly.
Now he's
1902, yes.
investigating rumors of slander against the British during the Boer War, and he goes to the restaurant with her. And then there's all the guys are sitting up there, and they're drinking the beers, and I'm like, what the hell is this movie about? Is this what this movie's about? It's like, not really. And all that first half hour is just to get to the duel, so he can meet this guy who's going to be his best friend, the German.
Yeah.
For
And
the
that's like a
rest of
It's
the
cover
all
movie.
an explanation of why he has that walrus mustache.
Yeah, right, because he's got the scar.
Teo's
Teo is the most interesting character in this movie.
Teo
by-
is actually-
Teo's great. But I
Yeah.
think this is a movie again that you
because
need to know
Teo
that-
actually has an arc of learning.
yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Right.
and again, in that scene where he's talking about how, I read your speech, and like the only thing that's going to be left is German rules if you don't, if you go
Right.
through with what you're talking about.
You're gonna-
Like,
That's
any
one
means
reason the movie
necessary.
That's
that's one
interesting
reason the
because-
movie was so controversial in England at the time.
Well, yeah. Well, how much of this was a type of propaganda? I'm saying that.
Well, compare it to any American movie made
At the
during
time,
the war.
Americans were full on stupid propaganda at the time.
But
Like,
this
yeah,
is
yeah.
but this is anti-propaganda.
No, it
because
is.
this is
That's what
saying,
I'm saying. It's a fascinating way of saying it, because they're saying, well, we have to commit to total warfare because these guys are going to destroy democracy, and they use they use the example of the entire 20th century up to that point to prove it.
Yeah.
except
That's the
specifically
thing.
Churchill wanted this film shut down
He did
because he
hated it.
didn't
Well, he
like.
thought it was about himself.
Mhm.
Well, yes, and he
Mm.
didn't like the idea of saying we can't have a very British war.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
He didn't want to be a gentleman's war. You can't have that. You can't.
But it's interesting that it encapsulates that message of this total non-British fight dirty
Mhm.
kind of
Fight
warfare.
dirty.
Yeah, well, that comes back. That's the theme.
So
of this,
so
of this
so it
story.
Well,
presents
fight
the
to win.
So it presents the Nazis as a pure kind of evil that's never been seen before on the field of battle.
Right.
And yet, Jim, I'm totally copping from you because you said this last night. The main character who's German is very sympathetic, and he becomes the guy's best friend.
because he's the one who says you can't do this shit the way you've always been doing
Right.
it.
But as
You
Jim pointed out,
have to fight them.
would any American movie made during the period have
God,
presented
no, I can't imagine
a German so sympathetically?
Well, no, we didn't have the same impulses. We weren't part of the European.
I think
the warfare.
We
royal
declared war on
culture.
Germany second because they declared war on us after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
Right.
Like you don't have that relationship in
No,
America.
in America, we didn't have American knights over trying to dueling people and doing gentlemanly forms of warfare going back 3 centuries. We didn't have that here.
No, we specifically were the opposite of that. We were
Exactly.
the guerrillas in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. We're to shoot people in the dark and call ourselves a victory. So that's one of the reasons that we kind of understood what this had to happen, which I had people like Patton and Eisenhower coming and just stomping everything flat, basically. Daytime military.
Yeah, but I think John has a point, and I guess I did too at some point, that I just don't see American films in the 30s and 40s were like totally different. I mean, we didn't really get films like Rules of the Game that is like deconstructing romanticism, or this movie where you have the enemy, and yes, you have Nazis and they're doing horrible things, but you also have like decent Germans, the good German, I guess. But you have to wait till the 60s and 70s for that. With
the closest I think Americans get to this is Sergeant York. You ever seen that film?
Yes,
that's the way they define. That's kind of like Americanized warfare. Is this simple guy who goes over there and is forced to like take up the gun, but he doesn't because of his conviction.
But what's the
and
fucking?
that's a Howard Hawks film too.
Yeah.
What's
so,
the Hitchcock?
He knows what he's doing.
What's the Hitchcock one about the woman who might be the spy?
Rebecca.
No. Notorious.
Yes,
Notorious. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's the one I can think of, and it's a British director.
Yeah.
Right. Where you have the Germans slightly more than a caricature of evil.
Right. Yeah, Casablanca is a bad example of any stuff because
actually, the James Mason in what's the one with Cary Grant? Rot.
North by Northwest.
Yeah, North by Northwest. You've got he's slightly a more interesting villain. I think Hitchcock understood evil a lot better than most Americans did.
Yeah.
Although honestly, I think the American version of this film, which obviously never happened, but the American version of this film would have been a Japanese character.
Yeah.
It's interesting you bring that up. There should be an American version of this film, like now. How about like somebody who started out in Vietnam and then went into the Iraq War, the Gulf Wars, and then going into the Endless War and learned something from it. I'd love to see a version of this now.
Yeah,
except they'd have a really fucked up caricature of an Arab person, and
they probably would. Now, mind you, this is a celebration of Imperial England. So the watching there's
bits and
trophy
pieces
room
of it.
fill up with things he killed was like, oh, that's so goddamn imperial.
Oh, man, the trophy.
But an American lifelong officer would have that too.
Yeah, exactly. At the time, he would.
It would have been mountain lions and bighorn sheep and bears.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And don't forget the Hun.
And
I remember that, the Hun. There was a nice little linger on that.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting. There were 2 American characters, maybe 3. I can't tell if that guy who was the motorcycle guy was actually American or a British guy in blackface. I'm not sure.
I think he was a Jamaican who
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
trying
I
to do
think
Yeah,
I
that
would
was
go
weird.
Jamaican on
The,
that
the
one.
two officers,
Pre-
Mix
officer,
them up in
Wind
the
rush.
sidecars full of water.
yeah,
Yeah.
The
yeah.
officer and the NCO were Americans. They were there for the World War II, and they were playing World War I characters. You know, it's kind of interesting.
which is cute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
So because I didn't, who, somebody explain to me what Colonel Blimp actually is in reference to. since
It's
it
a
wasn't
series of
obvious.
comics from the 30s that were like in Punch magazine. There'd be
Yeah.
like this little corner panel of Colonel Blimp, and he'd be like this bloated, mustachioed Boer War veteran who'd say like outrageous Britishisms during the thing, like, "Oh, when we were fighting the Fuzzy Wuzzies, we always had pink gin," or something like that. It'd be funny if you were there, right? But he was kind of exemplified imperial, kind of like the imperial bloat at the time.
Oh, the jingoistic.
Jingoistic part of that.
He was a cartoon, and he was an object of ridicule.
Was he in
was
Life and Death of
satirical.
Colonel Blake? It's kind of
So-
like
And
Life
it's
and-
interesting. I hadn't noticed before, but they do give credit to the guy who created.
They did. They
Oh,
did.
Yeah.
I noticed that.
David Law, right?
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
Now, mind
I
you,
don't know how.
but they're saying
I don't
Life
know
and
how
Death.
the
It's
rights-
it's kind of like making a movie called
then.
The Life and Death of Dennis the Menace.
Yeah.
You try to put the
With David Lowe instead.
David, exactly. You're trying to actually put the myth down and try to end the myth of like this kind of thing. And this is what it talks about.
Well,
No,
it really
this is definitely the
humanizes-
life and death of Beetle Bailey.
There you go.
Yeah,
Oh,
There you go.
Well,
But I
so
mean,
the-
it really
the title's
humanizes
very
this pompous
subversive.
character.
Sergeant Snorkel closer to, but yes,
Mhm.
General
Sergeant.
Half Track. That's the Life and Death of
Right.
General Half Track.
So the title of this movie is in itself extremely subversive. Then.
It is. It's trying to make it's trying to make the audience kind of reimagine things they knew in the 30s.
Well, it's humanizing this ridiculous caricature.
Mhm.
Right.
He starts off, he's ridiculous when he's introduced. He's
Ridiculous
covered in
character.
sweat. He's wearing a towel.
Uh-huh.
You know, he's
Yeah.
he's all
Oh,
pompous
oh.
and
Sorry,
and then you take it back
Uh-huh.
and you see how he got there. And it's like, you know, to understand all is to forgive all.
Well,
Sure.
So
yeah,
nice hat,
because
nice hat,
my
Chris.
contention is, he basically has a chance to go with the times, like Theo tells him to do.
Yeah.
But he doesn't.
He
He
can't.
stops. He stops after the armistice, basically.
Basically,
Yeah.
And it's like nothing new. It's ridiculous. The war begins at midnight.
Right.
And it's like, what the fuck? You're being attacked right now.
Yeah. that's a good-
And even after having to go out to explain the retreat from Dunkirk,
Yeah.
and you're still gonna say the war starts at midnight, you fucking moron.
I know,
Like,
pretty much. Also,
I mean, it's a movie about getting old
yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
to some
Uh,
extent.
It's a word. No, getting your ideas getting old.
He could not-
intractably getting old.
He
Uh-huh.
could not change. Right,
Yeah.
right. And,
Now,
I mean,
mind
and yet you understand him, and the ending is very touching.
What do you think
And
about Deborah?
no,
What do you think about Deborah?
I love the fact that they don't try and explain Theo snubbing him at the prisoner of war camp.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a hell of a
It's
scene.
it's something that happens, and then later he says, "Oh, well, I regretted it. I shouldn't have
Yeah.
done it."
Right.
And then they're back to being okay.
The
But
thing
Yeah.
is,
Theo's a
if
much more complicated character.
He is.
Hey,
If I
it's
He's
said
also
you-
got
if
the
I-
best
if I-
scene in the movie.
If I
Yeah.
give you a hug, my friends wouldn't think I'm cool. Basically, is what I got.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
Deborah Carr playing multiple characters in this film. What an interesting choice.
That is
Yes.
surreal.
Now,
Another
another
thing
film that did
people-
this. Another film.
but also another thing that people hated.
Huh?
They hated Deborah Carr's performance in
What?
this.
She was great.
Yeah.
I thought she was great.
I thought she was quite good. Yeah.
I'm just what I read about it.
Yeah.
It's again, he was told that he should cut it out of the movie.
Is it the
Like-
device of using the same actor to play three characters?
Maybe
Man,
It's-
It threw people off.
It worked
I don't
in
know
Joe
why.
versus a volcano. What the hell
Yeah.
are you talking about?
No shit.
it worked in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yes, it did. It worked just fine. Exactly.
And you had the opposite of it in that obscure object of desire.
Yeah. That's
So
how
you
that
had
was.
two actors playing the same character.
Yeah,
And
it was-
Lost
that was a-
Highway.
That was a trip. That was
Yeah.
very strange.
No, I thought she was fine. I just
yeah, she was.
I just thought it was really interesting that
Plus, I
in,
love Deborah Carr. So.
Yeah.
Very
in the-
charismatic.
in
I do
both
now.
of these movies, we have what is now considered to generally be a pretty good acting performance
Mhm.
that at the time was just completely shit on by everyone.
Wow.
And you should take it out of the film.
No,
like-
Yeah.
that's
Well, it
messed
must have
up.
been disappointing to her because
Well,
I
you
thought she was
know,
great.
films and film critics tend to be very conservative in the non-political sense, but they tend not to like change. And yes, whenever something new comes along, they just can't stand it until like 20 years have passed.
Well, it was a bold choice.
Okay.
It was a bold choice.
That's one of my favorite things about Roger Ebert, is because he didn't come from that sort of like ivory tower school of film criticism. He could just be like, yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, he was, he was a Chicago guy. He's the
Right.
Yeah,
He was a Chicago guy with a drinking problem for at least the early part of his career. Like, he was just like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the midnight show and be like, fuck yeah, move that camera.
I thought that Siskel and Ebert both had drinking problems.
Did you guys
different kinds though?
There's a 4 or 5 minute Criterion short about the restoration with Scorsese talking about it.
I was going to look at it. Yeah.
Oh, check it out. It's really worth the time, because it goes into like how the Technicolor process works, and it actually shows the enormous fucking camera that they shot this movie with.
You weren't familiar with that?
I was not. No.
As a filmmaker, you should know how the gigantic Technicolor 3-strip camera is essential to how films in the late 30s and early 40s were made. Man.
Well, don't shame me. Don't shame me.
Don't
shame me, Scott.
Volkswagen, man. It had 3 strips of film and a big prism in the middle, and it's just nuts.
You basically shot 3 movies simultaneously.
Yeah,
which made the restoration
of film. It was all
bitch.
running properly, basically.
Yeah, it made the restoration a bitch. It was
Yeah,
just,
it did. No, but actually, it was good though, because you had 3 pristine color channels.
I can't believe that Scott just got film theory or film history hipster here.
Yeah.
Like,
I always have been. You know that.
What do you mean? This is news?
Yeah.
No, because normally he's just like, oh, I bought this really expensive lens for my webcam. Everyone enjoy it. But now he's just like yelling at someone for not knowing how
You should, but the thing is, everybody should know how the 3-strip process works. That's essential.
We're not all 70 years old,
John,
man.
but
it's essential to have. No, the technical aspect of how Technicolor was done in the early days is essential to how these films were made, because the cameras were so heavy and so light and sensitive that you had to have a very heightened sense of reality in them. This is all going to cut out, right? Because this is stupid.
I only know this.
You're the editor. You're the editor, Scott. So that's up to you.
I'm making a note of myself.
I'm pretty sure that's the clip. I'm pretty sure that's the clip. Actually, that's not getting cut out at all.
That's the clip.
Leave in the part where you treat me like a dumbass, though.
You should know this, John.
Good enough.
I know how Technicolor works.
No, you don't.
I only because I read when Scorsese made The Aviator.
How the fuck do I do?
And
this?
every part of that movie was a different version of film technology. And
Oh, The Aviator, yeah, I know.
Yeah,
There was
Technicolor
2-pack and there was
like
Technicolor and there,
the second quarter of that movie.
Yeah, and so on. But I would still great pick though. I really enjoyed
My point
it.
that I was going to make.
Yes,
was
sir.
that it looks fucking great on the Criterion channel.
The restoration is perfect.
I think I got the same version on the HBO Max because they had the Janus logo at the beginning.
God, when it cuts to those first shots of the motorcycles going down the road, it's just like, wow,
Hey.
movies used to look like that.
Tim Burton stole that.
Is it in a Tim Burton movie?
Yeah, Willy Wonka. Remember that? Where all the statues are going out?
I blocked everything about that movie out of
the
my
game
mind.
his version of Willy Wonka, a bunch of guys in scooters go out and they keep branching out and branching out and branching out.
Right.
Oh,
It keeps splitting.
Yeah,
So he totally
exactly.
swiped it.
He totally swiped it. yes.
I got the DVD of Willy Wonka from Video Droid, and it was scratched, so it kept locking up like a minute and a half into it. So I never watched that because the fucking DVD was scratched. I was
You
just
saw the
like,
motorcycles.
Maybe. All I remember is having to like restart it a bunch of times and being like, fuck this.
Yeah. That'll kill you every time I scratch DVD. That's the worst.
I think that this is there's a
We get
very
forgetting a
strong
kids movie from
story
Video Droid.
here. I thought that the 2 of the 3 leads were really good. Anytime the German guy was on screen, the
It was
movie got
compelling.
better for me. And he had that great speech. Well, actually, that entire scene of him trying to apply for what is it? Just
Refugee
He's
status.
trying to get back into England.
Yeah, go through immigration.
That scene was really good.
Yeah,
Because it was nuanced. It was layered.
Yeah.
He tells the
And
story,
he
then he
came
has to go
back
back
to
and
No, my
England.
kids are Nazis, not me.
Yeah,
exactly.
that was
Pretty much.
That was all really, really good. And then I thought that there were some maybe it's just of the time, like things of the time that kind of took me out of it repeatedly. I will never stop thinking about the duel scene that cuts as soon as the action starts happening.
That got me too. I was like,
actually, it was a little confusing to me. I wasn't
Like,
sure that.
wait, what? Are we going back?
No, I'm thinking, did he really go through a plate glass window? What's going on here? Did he win or lose? I was a little lost.
It's such a bold choice. Like, I'm gonna like all of that ceremony, and the second they start, he cuts away.
They
what do you
read
think?
all the rules to the duel.
So he
what
lost.
he lost, right?
They both got so fucked
I think
up.
it
I
was
thought it was a draw.
They got fucked up and they had to quit. They both went to the hospital.
Yeah.
It's a sword, not a
that's what I thought.
gunfight. So
All right, I wasn't sure.
But I don't think Teo didn't get a scar on his face though.
didn't
no, he got one in his forehead.
Forehead.
His forehead.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
right up at his hairline.
Andy
Yeah,
got one right below the
because
lip.
the thing about this kind of duel is the point was you cut someone's face. Like that's how you
one
won.
cut, yes.
Was cutting someone's face because they would have a scar for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And someone would say, "How did that happen?" And you would say, "In a duel." Which
I was
means
dueling
you
the
lost.
Count of Grassberg. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So
exactly.
it was a draw then.
Yeah.
Technically a draw.
Yeah.
They would also rub like dirt into it to like make the
Yeah,
scar
make it
more
extra
prominent.
pretty.
They had these interesting helmets that they wore while fencing as students that had like an exposed part, so you could whack away at the helmet without killing the person.
Oh, that's
But
good.
you'd actually give them a scar, so they could,
That's fun.
it's my dueling scar.
It reminds me of Fearless Leader from Bullwinkle.
Of course,
Yeah, that
there's
lovely
a
dueling
reason
scar
why
right there.
Fearless Leader had that scar.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and it carried over. Like the Belgians did that, the French did that. Like it was a whole continental thing. The English didn't really participate in that, which may be why he didn't really know what was going on in that
Yeah,
scene.
that makes sense.
Like that's definitely more of a continental thing.
Also, he's such a handsome devil before this all happened too. It's the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought the women. I thought the one woman who plays
One man.
All the women, yes.
was well integrated into the story though.
It was. And actually
usually-
mostly a voice of reason too, which is interesting.
Yeah,
She was not just like a window dressing. Like
right. A pretty.
Not at all.
No,
Yeah.
no, not
No, and-
passionate.
And allowed to be funny too.
Yeah,
Yeah, she
And
was
resourceful.
my favorite thing.
yeah.
Well, it's like that, James Mason film about the troubles we saw. What was it called?
Odd Man.
Oh,
I've been out. The
Right.
women in that
Yeah.
were just window dressing in some ways. She was more
Yeah.
active and more interesting than that film, in terms of like being.
Well, and you really see it too, because the first one,
Uh,
the first Deborah Carr character
Uh.
is not really into the war that much. She thinks it's kind of silly. The second one is like she really likes the idea of marrying a soldier.
mhm.
And then the third one is in the military.
That's right.
She is a soldier.
She is.
then diving under the desk.
That was the best.
Yeah.
Actually, taking a whole bunch of guys in like Lend-Lease Dodge trucks out all the way to London and hiding in their desk when they get there. It's the best.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
It was good stuff. It was just well done. It was good.
I also like the way it begins and ends because you really do get a different. It's basically the same scenes,
It's the
but
same
you have
scene.
context.
Yeah.
For,
Yeah.
No,
What's
I
happening.
thought that was clever. I thought.
Although it's
Yeah.
kind of like this, it's kind of that really rudimentary, like the whole idea about doing a film as a flashback. You
yeah,
got back to the present day again in the beginning of the film. It's like it felt like they were just trying to figure it out.
yeah.
You know what I mean? A
Well-
newer film wouldn't bother with all that stuff.
Because I mean, Casablanca has those extended flashbacks in Paris. There's another Bogart film that Curtiz did. What is it called? It takes place mainly on a ship going to like the Caribbean or something.
Of the Mask of Demetrios? No, the Voyage of
No,
Marseille?
it's got flashbacks inside of flashbacks.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, jeez.
It's like, wait a minute, where am I? I just came out of a flashback, but I'm still in like pre-war France or
That's
something.
hilarious.
It's like Inception. You haven't gone all the way out of the
Yeah,
dream
you haven't
state.
gotten popped back up to the top level.
Right.
In
Right.
fact, some say we're still in the last level of that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Possibly.
That's
Anyway,
right.
I'm gonna get the thumbs, man.
Well, I got something else I wanted to say,
Oh,
which
do
is
tell. Take it.
a little bit more of a just sort of a amusing, not so much like on the film itself, but just my experience of watching both these films was very similar in that not sure about this movie, trying to figure it out. What's this about? Who are all these people? Okay, now I'm kind of getting it. And then by the time both of them ended, I'm like, I'm in, I'm committed for, I agree with some of what's been said about the flaws with Colonel Blimp. I do think it's too long. I think it pulls some punches weirdly, like the cutting away from things that I wanted to see.
A little bit propagandistic, a little bit.
But yeah, and then the big game hunting, etc. But in general, my point is that
peeping Tom next time.
These are two.
I almost picked it.
I'm gonna have to get an even bigger air horn for Scott talking about propaganda. God damn it! What do you think movies are, man?
Different discussion.
But my point is that I really enjoyed these films, and I enjoyed them the most after the end, when I had time to think about them for a day. I'm doing the dishes. I'm still thinking about that.
I
movie
agree
because there
with
was
you.
a lot in it.
It lingered me too, as well.
I think that's a kind of filmmaking that's really gone very much out of vogue, in that at the time these were made, there weren't, a million, shows and movies coming out on streaming channels. We weren't being barraged by the internet. There's a tendency now that you would never make a movie that somebody might flip the channels away from. And there's so much in both these movies that had I not been assigned the Colonel Blimp movie or the Renoir, and I come across it on television, I probably wouldn't have stayed with it long enough to understand it and appreciate it, because that's just not the way content is. Now, I mean, content is made now, and the word content, not only like the decisions that the producers are making as to what gets greenlit, but scripts. It's like, I've read so much knowledge, so much, don't do this when you're writing a script. You got to hook them by page 10. You got to hook them by page 1. There's got to be a reason for them to turn the page. What's going to happen next? That doesn't exist in these movies. You got to commit for 30, 40 minutes to even decide if you like the thing.
No, that's puppies.
Look how big it is.
Anyway, dude, what if this was What If film? I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. I'm going to give it 1.5.
Yeah, no.
But you've seen it already, right, Jim?
Yeah, I had.
I had not seen it before. I didn't know it existed, and I thought it was.
I've even seen
the name was so silly it kept me away from it. You know what I mean? The name sounded really stupid, and so seeing it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I always thought I don't want to see something called that.
The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. That sounds still too.
Well, who did it? Oh, Michael Powell. Oh, I should probably see that.